Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. We're going to get right to the show after these messages. You know, I love podcasting. I have since 2006, back when you had to use like a Dixie cup with string to make the thing work. And that's why I'm so excited that we recently moved Mysterious Goings On to Anchor FM to record our podcast. I gotta tell you, I don't regret it a bit. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. I'm not going to lie to you, when I first heard about Anchor, I was a little dubious because I've been doing it the hard way for so long. But I got to tell you, it's very easy. Use a Stripe account. Get sponsors. You're not paying monthly hosting fees. The sound quality is great. The distribution is phenomenal. Friends, download the free Anchor app today if you want to start your own podcast, or go to anchor.fm to get started. Remember, you heard it here first on Mysterious Goings On.
This is Michelle Cox. I'm the author of the Henrietta and Inspector Howard series, and you're listening to Mysterious Goings On.
You know, one of the pure joys of doing this show, and I've done since 2016, my gosh, where does the time go? Speaking of time, I just tripped myself up, because one of the pure joys of doing this show is to talk about creativity in relation to time. Now, this is something that I'm particularly interested in right now, because we have a poet amongst us who is going to talk about her work and how the concept of time and acceptance runs through them. That's why I'm really excited to welcome the wonderful Sonia Iris Lozada. She is a poet and performer fascinated with perceptions of time, history, dreams, psychology, and the metaphysical. Her #1 best-selling publications include Inspire Me, Raw, Follow Akashic Dreaming Through Time, and Inspire Me, Perception. Her upcoming book is entitled Inspire Me in Time of Need, which is the third in the Inspire Me series. Poetry has always been Sonia's way of explaining the bicultural world around her. As an actor for both stage and screen, she has appeared in films such as Out of the Wild and Expired, among others. Her podcast, Poetic Resurrection, launched in February 2021 with great acceptance. Her book, Follow Akashic Dreaming Through Time, is currently being adapted for film. And if that's not big enough for you, she's right here on Mysterious Goings On. Sonia, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this interview.
Well, me too. Me too. I have dabbled in some of the same areas you have. I was never SAG, but I used to act. I did a little this and that. Did some stand-in work and stuff like that back in the day, and a lot of community and semi-pro theater, that kind of thing. And I'm a writer. But the areas though where you really got me though is poetry. We don't have a lot of poets on the show. We had one a few weeks ago, Rachel Knoll, who's wonderful. And I'm just in awe of poets, because I think that there is this particular confidence that comes with a poet who can put these things together, because I think that there are so many barriers to entry in people's minds to poetry. It takes a lot of, I'll just say it, I think it takes a lot of guts to be a poet. What do you think of that?
Well, it does take guts in terms of you're really exposed. When you write poetry, it's also a way, it's very therapeutic, because it's a way of allowing yourself to just be extremely open, extremely vulnerable. And within that medium that it's very subjective. So you're going to go in having people hate it or love it. But it's one of those. So I try to make my poetry simple, because I love poetry and I would love people to love poetry as well. And my third book is a little bit more complicated. That's Inspire Me Perceptions, but it's everything about perceptions, because how we think of life is how it happens. And if we just change that perception to the opposite, it's amazing how things open up.
Is this something, this concept of, because I agree with you, I think you create your own reality, your perception of reality, that is your reality, right? I mean,
Correct.
you could think you're walking around under a very dark gray cloud, with rain, and everybody else is out in the sun and throwing frisbees and having a good time in the park, because your perception is, no, everything sucks right now. But so you're talking about that. So I have to ask you, just going back to your acting, which is a very tough job. Talk about, one, being exposed, but two, the rejection level, the sheer rejection level of it. Is this something that you've had with you, or has your acting helped you incubate this feeling of your perceptions and reality?
Acting is very difficult. In terms of the rejection rate, it's like 95%. And I fell into the rabbit hole of thinking that rejection is acceptable. And rejection is not acceptable. It's okay to be, and what I mean by that is you can't think of rejection as the end all. You can't think of it as you have no value or you have nothing to give. Within acting, there are so many other facets that make the choosing of you for a role. I mean, it's something as simple as you're too short, you're too fat, you're too tall, you're too talented. If you're talented over the lead, guess what? You're not probably going to get the role. So there's so many factors in it that you can't take rejection as a true rejection. That's what I meant by not accepting it. You can't accept it as self-value. It isn't self-value. I've walked into some auditions and the casting directors, they just love me. The director of the film or TV loved me. And then that's it. I don't hear anything again.
Yeah.
So either way, one time I went into an audition and I was acting. Commercials normally have you act with another person. This guy was so bad. And he was playing my husband and I'm trying to do my role. I go, oh, I'm so screwed. This is one I'm not getting. And I actually got it. In fact, it was because what happens is they have to submit that to the directors, you and them. But if you're acting against somebody that's not very good, sometimes they just trash it and don't even give it to the director to make a choice. But in this case, they did. And I actually got the job even though the guy was really bad. She apologized to me. No, he didn't get it. And she even apologized to me afterwards. She goes, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And they apologized because, when they know your work. At this point in my life, when I go into a casting office, they already know me.
Yeah.
They know my work. They just want to see how I'm going to do the role. And if I'm good with whoever they already have.
Right.
So many times there was one time I actually was told I had a role, and it was on a major TV show. And then they decided to just recast it after they told me they had it. So it's that you never know what's going to happen. I had a movie coming up and I was just waiting for the contract. And a week later, I still haven't heard anything. And the producers decided to offer it to somebody else.
It's a hard business. And I can still recall talking about rejection, all that. This is an area where I didn't get rejected, Sonia. I did a lot of industrial film. I don't even know if do they still call it that, training film?
Yeah, they do, but they're under SAG right now. A lot of them are under SAG.
Well, I wasn't, and this was back here in the Midwest and years ago. And my agent kept getting these comments, which I got work, but the comments were, yeah, when it comes to, we want the good looking guy, and then we want Alex to be like the screw up at work. We want the good looking guy to be the good employee. We want Alex to always be and I just looked at her. I said, am I really that hideous? She said, no, but you're not A plus, you're not A-lister good looking. You're nice looking, but you're not that. And I had to learn. And then, but she said, remember something, Alex. I said, what's that? She says, your check's cash just the same as his too.
It does. And you know what I find? That someone that is not the lead actually can steal a scene so much easier.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Really can.
Yeah. Well, being the bad employee, I got to chew the scenery, and I did one for the Postal Service, and I mean, I got to just chew the scenery about all the wrong ways to do everything. I just thought that this is fun. So yeah, totally. But Sonia, so back to poetry though, because I was going to say too, just like acting, I write mysteries and thrillers, and not everybody likes them. And the thing I had to learn early on, I'm on like my 8th one, is it's not for everybody. And that's not for me to say like, it's so good you don't get it. It's just, it's not for everybody, right? Not everybody's going to dig into poetry. I think a lot of people, I said earlier about a barrier to entry. I think some people are intimidated by poetry, and I love that you have what you say, that simple approach. But I think the thing, the writers listening to this show, I hope, are going to glean from this, who are concerned about this, is just to remember, it's okay if not everybody loves your work or not everybody reads it. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, when Edgar Allan Poe was around, a lot of people didn't like his poetry. He was an excellent journalist, but much of his poetry was not accepted, and he's brilliant. He's one of my favorite, classic poets, because he was twisted. I like people that are a little twisted in their.
Really?
Yeah. Well, stuff like, the cast of Amontillado. No.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like dark.
Oh yeah, isn't that the one where he bricks up people behind the wall? Isn't that
yes,
one? Yeah,
yes, and the pendulum. I forget the actual name of it.
Oh, the pit and the pendulum.
Pendulum, yeah.
Yes. Sonia, I got to tell you something real quick about Edgar Allan Poe. So I went to Baltimore 20 years ago on a business trip, and he's buried in this really tiny little churchyard that's now between all these little these buildings. It's one of those deals like you're in a neighborhood of a city and you've never been there, and you're just walking around and went, wait a minute, that's Edgar Allan Poe. So I went over there, and it was years ago when they had the first digital cameras, the big boxy looking things,
Yes.
And I had a colleague, I said, would you take my picture? I said, I'm a writer, and Edgar Allan Poe. And she's like, oh, okay. And she was like, whatever. She took the picture, and it was the digital. She took the picture like 5 times, and every time the picture was warped of me. No kidding, Sonia. I'm not kidding. The picture was warped. Like it was like something weird, like a weird gauzy veil or something that twisted the image of both me and the headstone. The picture never turned out properly.
Ooh, the first thing I thought of when you just said that to me, there's like electromagnetic interference somehow, because it's a digital camera.
Right.
Eerie.
Just saying.
Yeah.
It was probably low battery or something.
Yeah, like the simple stuff that people that go to Ghostbusters and then they go, you're just sitting on a lot of electromagnetic stuff right now, so you're not really seeing anything.
Yeah. Or that power transformer right there, 10 feet up, that might have an effect on your electronics. That's
yes.
Well, I'm sorry we were chasing rabbits there, but I love that stuff. So Sonia, talk to me about when did it hit you that, did you just start writing the stray poem that eventually you put together into your first book, or did you say, I'm going to put together a book of poetry?
What happened was me writing poetry was how I released a lot of stress. I've been doing it since I was a kid, so I guess I was a stressful kid without knowing it. But I always wrote poetry. Granted, I never edited it. I never publicized it. When I had to write poetry for a literary class, then I would fix that. In the 80s, I was a punk rocker and I wrote lyrics. Yes, I recorded with Bob Casale from Devo. He produced me on one.
Really? Why is that not in your bio? I don't see that in your bio.
No, it is not in my bio. I wasn't a great singer then. Maybe that's why.
Well, it's not as if Devo was like, the greatest singers, but they were incredible. So there you go.
They were really great. Yes. And I worked with
Yeah.
this one guy from Tom, and he's since passed. So has Bob Casale. They both have passed.
Oh, really? Okay.
And they worked with helping me write the music. With Tom Corey helped me write the music. And we recorded this back in the 80s. I worked with them. I also had an underground magazine called Lost, and it's LOZT. And I interviewed Echo and the Bunnymen. I had photo shoots with the Clash, not photo shoots, but I shot them at a concerts, the Clash, the Cure, all of those bands.
I mean, I'm envious of all of this. The 80s were my jam.
Me too.
Oh, geez. You know what? I don't care what anybody says. The 80s, at least culturally for me with that music, because I was punk, but new wave as well. I really loved all. So you really interviewed Echo and the Bunnymen? Really? Jeez.
Yes, it was really nice. It was funny because I asked them questions, and I think I still have the cassettes. I have to make sure. I'm afraid to digitize it because I don't want it to disintegrate. So I'm going to have it professionally done. But I interviewed him, and I'll share it with you once I get that done. He was really great, a little defensive when I first interviewed him. But then it was funny when we went to I had the press pass for the Palladium, and we went backstage, and he already knew me. So he felt comfortable with me. This is Ian McCulloch.
Yeah.
And he's hiding behind me and my friends as protection. He didn't want the crowd to just jump on him. Great guy, actually very sweet.
I heard him on First Wave on Sirius XM a few months ago. Yeah, he's still going strong, and as far as I know there. But man, if you do digitize, think about that. You could do a whole separate limited pod series of all those interviews you did. You could do an 80s retrospective, with Sonia Iris Lozada.
That's a great idea.
Well, you should do it. Digitize it. Yeah. Well, hey, just give me a little credit. Just say, hey, that guy Alex in that place that time.
Yeah,
one time,
he gave me the idea to do this.
He gave me the idea, and he was really good as a screw up in an industrial films. That's all I remember. Okay. Look what I did here. I took you off the kills.
I was about to do a poetry book on them and use the Clash and use all these people. The reason I didn't do it was because, like me as an actor, if you want to use my image, normally within a project, there's a percentage you have to pay in a book. So I wanted to pay that. I had no problems with that. We just couldn't find the contacts for most of these people anymore to get permission. And then, you put aside 5% and pay them, which I don't have a problem with paying. If I'm using your image, then why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fair to me.
It is totally fair. People I don't think most people who aren't in the business get that, but it's interesting. I've had writers ask me, by the way, this happened just the other day. I had a writer contact me and say, hey, I want to put some lyrics from so-and-so's song in my book. I'm like, that's great. You better talk to them first. Do not do that without permission unless you have an ASCAP license. And even then you should check. And they're like, oh, okay. And they didn't really understand that. I think a lot of people don't. I used to have a boss. Here we go, chasing rabbits again. I had a boss once, and he did not understand we were doing a festival and we were going to pump in music. He didn't understand, though. This is 50,000 person festival. According to ASCAP rules, you have to have a license. He did not get that. He thought that music was free because it's on the radio. And I just laughed at it. I could not explain it to him. He couldn't wrap his head around that point that artists actually are paid royalties practically the rest of their careers for this music, right?
Yeah, and exactly. If you work in radio, you know that the radio, even though they're pumping it out free for us to hear, they still have to pay the license to play it.
Yeah.
I remember working behind the scenes and having to do that. So it's never free. And I don't think it should be free. You have to make money somehow.
Well, yeah. People don't get that. It's so funny. I'll never forget. I'll roll out a book, and people who are friends or family used to ask me, well, when do I get my free copy? I'm like, really?
It's not free. Somebody has to pay for it. Normally me.
Yeah. And I'm just like, I'm already not going to make any money on this damn thing. You buy it anyway. Okay. Back to poetry. I'm so sorry I got you off track. Because we need to talk about the poetry in the books. I want to talk about this. So you've been writing your whole career, your whole life to help you
Yes.
deal with things. And so when was the point? Because it was what? It's 2017 when you put the first book together. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. What happened was I was at home and I had foot surgery, minor foot surgery. But I kept thinking, what am I going to do with myself? And I would start writing poetry anyway. And it was one of those enlightening points in my life where I said, I'm going to get over myself and I'm going to publish these, because I was totally afraid of being judged.
Mhm.
And I said, well, how can I go to the next step if I don't allow myself to just be? So I wrote the book, got an editor, and she really helped me because it was very rough. But it came out good. And that hitting that publish button, I don't know if you self-publish, I do. And Amazon was telling me, hit enter, hit enter. And my finger was over the enter button, but I didn't want to enter it because they were going to, oh my God, I'm going to be judged. People are going to make comments. What if they hate me? I went through all of that, but I finally just said, screw it, get over myself. Whatever happens, happens. And what happened was people reached out to me with the comments and the reviews saying, I thought you were talking about me. This was so raw, and it really hit to the core of what I'm feeling. So even though I was terrified, it really helped people. And I think that got me on the path that ended up with the podcast eventually, because I really felt great about helping people. And if I can help you with me just being me, how grateful can I be? I mean, that's amazing to me. I get to be me and help others. That's kind of a goal for me. And I reached it with that book.
Well, it's a magnificent goal, I think, and probably the most rewarding.
It really
thing.
is.
I mean, money's nice and people recognizing you and all that with your books, but to know that somebody identified with it. I don't quite have that level with what I do, but when I get somebody who just says, you gave me something entertaining to read when I was bored on a plane or on a beach or during lockdown, that's a nice feeling. That's, to me, that's the same as doing a play and getting applause. It's a good feeling.
Yes.
Sonia, I want to ask you about, okay, I've got here, this is where, okay, I'm going to make a bigger fool of myself than I have so far. So, brace yourself. Are you good? All right. So let's talk about perceptions of time, history, dreams, psychology, and the metaphysical as it relates to your poetry. Let's lay it on me. I'm just going to sit back and listen here. I want you to give me the whole, the Cliff's notes for the class on this stuff.
Okay. I am a very intuitive person and empathic. And when I meditate, I get more in touch with the core and I see things clearer. So if I'm stuck writing a poem, or if I'm stuck with something in life, if I could quiet my mind, we all have the answers. We just have to quiet that mind that says shoulda, coulda, woulda. So me with time, and I came up with my second book called Follow Akashic Dreaming Through Time, because I kept having dreams every night. And it was really weird. They were weird dreams. Like one of them was about a potter and he's doing his pottery, but there was such sadness in it. And then I saw the numbers 300 BC. So I wrote that down. And then I decided to do some research, and I went through all the different countries, Europe, Africa, South America, to look at their pottery about what happened in 300 BC. And until I got to the terracotta soldiers warriors in China, I said, that's it. That is it. So I started doing research, and the research pointed that even though a potter that made the terracotta warriors was an artisan and very well respected, they still worked very long, hard hours. And I put it where the artisan was missing his family. He just wanted to be home he knew he had a prestigious position with making that because that was an honor at that time. And so I just came up with the first stanza. Another one was really weird. I saw a woman in Native American, and she was quickly trying to make a brew. You know, she had a mortar and a piston. I guess that's what they're called. And she, this was a dream. Most of these are dreams. And this one, it panned, I'm using, film terms now, it panned over to a warrior, and he's sitting there with holding his gut, but he's been shot.
Oh.
And so she's trying to make a brew. And so I came up with another poem for that one. I did more research to find out what things were called at that time. There was another one about a baker who I saw with the peel pulling out the bread, and he's this big guy, bald headed, all sweaty. And it was just like he was working so hard. He was just working so hard. And I did research, and in the 1600s, around the time of, actually before that, because it was the Black Plague. I don't exactly know what time the Black Plague was around. I think it was the 1600s. The bakers made bread to sustain the entire town. It was their responsibility. I didn't know that. So I found that extremely interesting. In Follow Akashic Dreaming Through Time, a lot of research went into each stanza. And within each stanza, the reason it's called Akashic Dreaming Through Time, because there's a belief that there isn't like an energy or a knowledge field that we just have to tap into. And when you tap into it, is the Akashic. And the Akashic doesn't know the past, present, or future. It just tells you the story. So it could be a reincarnation or my own, or I went back and saw somebody. That's why I figured I tapped into the Akashic records. And it got that name because of the history of it, of tapping into it. The same thing goes with, if you notice, many scientific breakthroughs happen all at the same time. There'll be someone in China, there'll be someone in the US, someone in Europe that came up with exactly the same idea at the same time. So these Akashic records, it's like, if you can tap into them, you grab that knowledge. And that's what the metaphysical and all of that time put in together. I'm fascinated by the Akashic records.
Does it ever disturb you, these dreams and these things? Do you ever wake up from this and feel legitimately not scared, that's not the right word, but unsettled?
Well, actually, I've woken up from some of them being totally terrified.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. You see things like, there was that like night terrors sometimes you get, but not like the movies that they make it like you wake up every night that way. No, nothing like that. Sometimes I've woken up from one or a meditation even. And I've seen, like I saw a friend of mine lying in a hospital bed. So I said, okay, is that in my head? Let me call them and see how they're doing. So I called him and I said, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, why? I go, you're going to think this is weird, but I saw you lying in a hospital bed and I just needed to make sure you were okay. And he was silent. And he says, I got out of the hospital 2 days ago. So it's that kind of thing. I mean, half the time, I don't know what to do with it. There's a poem in my third book called Silhouette. And it's about excuse me. Excuse me. It's about a man that broke into my apartment and he had a gun in his hand, and it was quite a traumatic experience. And the reason I bring it up, it's because I saw that happening 2 months before. I kept having these recurring dreams. And when I told my friend who was now in New York, she said, I'm so glad I wasn't there. She goes, that's that dream you kept having. And I had forgotten about it. And she's the one that reminded me. And so that dream silhouette, I mean, that poem silhouette is about that experience.
Are you, and maybe you said this and I'm just misinterpreting, but here, let me just make my assumption. So if you're the dreamer,
Mm-hmm.
are the dreams always in reference to your own life in your belief system? Like, as you said, maybe it's being a former life, or are you often just like an observer turning on some kind of Akashic TV you're watching?
I think it's both.
You
It's
do?
hard for
Okay.
me. Yeah. I think you're just getting, and I feel anybody can do this. Anybody
Really?
can. Oh yeah, you just have to quiet the mind. If you
Oh,
look at
that's
our
so easy.
lives, oh yeah, right. I'm a meditator. I've been meditating for a long time. But I have a phrase that I used on I got interviewed on another podcast and the woman just loved it. The soul whispers as the mind screams. So really having to quiet that mind. And the mind, people say, oh, the mind does this and the mind does that. Mind is not a bad thing. The mind is only here to protect us and give us knowledge that, because if you look at how fragile human beings actually are, we need something like the mind to protect us, to keep us aware. But the problem with the mind, it does not know what is good or bad, or positive or negative, or what's actually harmful or a perception of harm. But when you can quiet it, your soul can tell you, or your spirit or your higher self or whatever it is that you believe in, because I don't knock religion or beliefs. We can all feel that within our own soul. If you get in tune with that, I think we have a better direction as to what's important in our lives and what we need to do next.
It's, yeah, do you think people are actually receiving a lot of these dreams and just write it off as, well, that was nuts? You know what I mean? Like, I'll have this crazy dream where apparently I'm, actually eating a hat with syrup on it because I said something silly to a baboon who was hanging out at the movies. And I said, you also need to be quiet because the show's about to start. And then a pink bicycle ran over me with a Barbie doll trailing behind it. All of those things. And am I supposed to like look at that and go, obviously that means something? Or is sometimes, in your opinion, and I'm not knocking what you're saying, I'm just throwing this out here, do you think sometimes those dreams are just the brain's way of getting rid of it's like recycling all the crap that maybe that's been in your consciousness, or do you reject that?
It can be, but look at what the story you just told me. It could have been as simple as like, wow, now you have an idea for a children's book. Look at Alice in Wonderland.
True.
To me, when I have like a weird dream, I'm like, what kind of story can I make from this? To me, life, it's just a story coming to you. And it's your creativity when your mind is quiet and it's allowing you to visit your inner soul, your inner beings. I mean, I just saw a children's book with everything you just said to me.
I probably should do a better job of listening to my inner child too. And I don't mean that facetiously at all. I think you get far into adulthood, some people, I know I have, and it's easy to lose touch with that fun, goofy side. It's funny. I have a friend who listens to both of my podcasts who says, sometimes on these shows, you just get outright goofy. And I said, I know, it's embarrassing. They're like, no, it's just nice to see you unfettered by convention or worried about how you look or sound, and that's a gift, Sonia. I think, I don't know, because that leads me into my next question, because you're a podcast host just like me. And I'm sure you're too nice to say it, but I'll say it. Sometimes I have guests that leave me a little cold, but then sometimes I have guests who I connect with and we're laughing. And it's like we're old friends and we may never meet again, but I'll always feel like they're my friend because we had an hour together and it was a hoot. And then there's just some that are just really closed off people for whatever reason. I just wonder if you've encountered the same thing in your show. Or encouraged
yes, I have. And I'm probably like you, you're a very good listener. So when you're a good listener, you get those little cues that people throw out.
Yeah.
And you get them instinctively. And it is hard to make people open up when they don't want to.
Right.
I find some people, it's all fear.
Yeah.
They don't open up with fear. And just like me not being judged, I didn't want to be judged on my book when I first released it. But people are going to judge you. People are going to have expectations. People are going to have beliefs. They just are.
Yeah.
But I find that if you are more authentic, and I know that word is so overused these days, but if you can be more authentic, I think that's all that really matters. Because it's, to me, if you're not true to yourself and you're pretending to be someone else, and then something bad doesn't or something doesn't work out for you, then it didn't work out for you because you were a phony. Versus if it didn't work out for you, maybe it's not meant to be. When something doesn't work out for me, I have to ask myself, is it a belief I have that it's not working? Or am I not meant to go that way?
Right. Why do you call your show Poetic Resurrection?
I call my show Poetic Resurrection because I was lazy, and my website is called Poetic Resurrection.
Okay, wait, next question. Why do you call your website Poetic Resurrection?
Let's use that radio voice.
Get right on there, yes.
I called it Poetic Resurrection because for me, my poetry was a resurrection. For me to open up and allow myself to publish, I felt like I was resurrected. I felt that I was no longer pretending to be something I wasn't. It was my own resurrection. And when I went looking for names, because let's face it, poetic and poet, it's like those names are all taken up. So I said, well, this is probably not going to be available, but let me look up Poetic Resurrection, because that's what I went through. And it was available.
So some might say that's poetic justice. I don't know.
Yes, there's also a show named that. I looked that one up too.
Yeah, I like that though. This is actually a show about poets solving crimes. Poetic justice. All right. I know we're getting, gosh, this has gone so fast. We're getting there. I'm not done yet though. I have to ask something here. Mm-hmm. Akashic Dreaming Through Time is currently being adapted for film.
Yes, what's happening, I did a film called Expired many years ago, and I'm still friends with one of the producers, a wonderful guy, and David Fredo, who was a producer on that show. And we read my book, and he says, this can be movies. And I told him what I was doing with it. I had someone that was at one of the studios was interested in the story, but there's nothing written except a poetry book. And it was a friend of mine that worked with the studio. So it was a contact really. And so we went through because each one is like a historical film on its own. And then we were writing on it. And there was one that was pretty intense, and it's political. And then everything happened with the, COVID, and then a couple months on Capitol. So I think we're going to stay away from that one. We're going to pick another one. The other one we had picked because the book is international. The first poem is with the terracotta soldiers, and then there's places in France and in South America and in America. So my idea was to do co-productions with other countries to do this, but we were just writing the treatment. We were not writing the script. So we were going to use his context too and present the treatment to these places. We're still going to be writing on it. We just, I think, are switched from the political one with everything politically that happened. Yeah. We're kind of staying away from the political version of it, but that's what's happening with the book.
So you're kind of hoping to get in the situation where you're going to be shown into producers' offices, handed a bottle of water, and then they're going to ask you to tell us what the movie is about that you're trying to pitch to them. Is that kind of the next step for you?
Well, once you submit a treatment, then you see who's interested.
Right.
And you get, an agent or a publicist to promote it, to try to find, because it's not a script. So whomever takes it, we'd have to develop it as a script.
Yeah.
I'm a writer, but I'm not good at writing scripts.
You just read my mind, because I was going to say, so given the opportunity, you would not want to get on final draft and do the screenplay?
No, it's not where I'm strong at. And there's other
Hmm.
people that are extremely strong with it. I can do all the visuals. That part is easy for me. That's why the treatment would be good. And I saw the story. So it would have to be, because now there's a thing in the industry that you don't write about people from China unless it's a Chinese screenwriter, because they know
Right.
better. They know
Right.
the language, they know the culture. The same thing with all the other ones. So it would be finding someone from that culture that can write it, that would really have the best with it.
Yeah, a story by credit is perfectly nice too, though, isn't it? So
Yeah, story by me.
there you go.
I like to
And
be
then,
more
of course,
involved with it, but
I was going to say maybe there might be a role in there. Who knows, right? I mean,
yeah, it wasn't written for me except for the one we were working on. That one was written for me.
It's the way it goes, isn't it?
But the other ones, I'm not married to what I write. If someone can take the story and really put it out there and do more with it, then I'm okay with that. The movie Arrival came from a short story.
That's right. That's right. It did.
And that's an excellent film. And you need someone that is actually that good of a scriptwriter that can write it.
Yeah. A lot of people forget that the beloved Shawshank Redemption is a short story by Stephen King. It's not a big novel. But it's become one of the greatest or most viewed films in history. So here we go. Sonia Iris Lozada. We are running low here on time, unfortunately, and I feel like we just scratched the surface here, but I'd like very much if you would please tell me what I need to put in the show notes, but you can tell everybody here, where do we find out more about you? What is the name of that website again? It's something about poetry, but I don't remember the rest.
It's poeticresurrection.com. And I also have an actor's website called sonialozada.com. But most of the poetry and what's going on, I'm also available. My podcast is available on Apple and Google and almost everywhere.
All the usual suspects, as we say.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we do. And I think I want to check out these volumes. What I love about this, and this is kind of what it intrigued me beyond just how kind you are, is that it's poetry, but it's poetry with this really interesting twist to it. I mean, the whole Akashic Dreaming thing, I really didn't understand it, and you've explained it beautifully to me, and I love it because it just puts me kind of in this. I'd like the idea of having one foot in another world, and this is really interesting to me. So I appreciate you introducing that to me and our listeners.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This was really a lot of fun.
It was a great time. You come back when you get your movie out or when you have another book. Is that a deal?
That is a deal.
Thanks so much for listening to Mysterious Goings On. Don't forget we have a complete archive of all of our interviews, monologues, updates, live readings, dead readings. All of that stuff is available at mgopod.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the usual suspects. Please join us there. Again, don't forget, mgopod.com also has links where to find me on social media and how to get in touch in case you want to be a guest here on the show. Well, I think it's time that I move on for this week, but until next time, keep reading.